Hello, welcome to Have Roots Will Travel. My name is Lisa Elvin Stoltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. This past year, we've been exploring Les Filles du Roi, and we're taking each and every one of them and getting to know them better in individual biographies. If you want to follow along, please subscribe and click on the notifications alert. If you'd like to know who we featured thus far, because we're now on episode 111, please have a look at my website, haverootswilltravel.com, where I have special pages set up where you can look at and click on the links. And so it's an easy find. Also, I have a Facebook page, Have Roots Will Travel, where I post whenever I post new content, which could be every day, could be 3 times a week, twice a week, depends on how much I can get done. So with that being said, let's get started and get to know our Fille du Roi for this episode. So the feature what we're going to be featuring today is Marie Campion. She is a viewer request. When I looked in my files, I've got my best friend is listed there, the boy next door's wife, and also one of my dear friends who's born 3 days apart, 3 days from me. She knows who she is, and so let's get to find out who Marie Campion is. So Marie Campion was born in 1654 in the city of Rouen, Normandy. Rouen, which is a city on the Seine River in northern France. It's the capital of the region of Normandy. And it has an amazing historical story. And as at one time, it was the largest city in medieval Europe. It played a prominent role in both English and French histories from the 11th to the 15th century. Joan of Arc was tried and burned alive here in 1431 in this area. Rouen is a city of cultural and educational significance. It is just one of those places where so much of France is found in this area. The history of it, And when you look at the map of France, I've circled Normandy so you can see where it is. And then the section of Normandy, it's like really at the top part where Rouen is. So this is where our girl comes from. Let's see when she comes over. After her mother's death, she actually embarked on La Nouvelle France and came on July 31st, 1670. She brought with her a dowry of about 200 pounds. So let's see how she, who she marries, who she picks. So the groom that she selects and who selects her, his name was Maître Duby. And he was born in 1631, making him quite older than her. And he was born in a place called La Chapelle Temeur. And that is, if you want to look at the map, where it is, Pays de la Loire, that is where that particular area is. And it's in because each region has kind of counties, and the county, if you want to call it that, it's actually called the département, is Vendée, le département de Vendée. And his little town is there, is found, and it is actually about 50 miles northwest of La Rochelle, just to give you some idea. And this particular town where he is born is one of the rare communes. We call it communes. It's not a town. In its cemetery, one of the oldest Hosanna crosses dating from the 13th century. Close to this cross are also 5 tombstones, falsely called Templars, dating from the 12th, 13th, and 14th centuries. So La Chapelle-Temeur is a rural municipality, but formerly it was an important village. And it was part of, you can see the gardens there, you can see the chapel where he would have been baptized. Absolutely historic little town, as little towns go. So this is where he's coming from. So presumably Maître came to New France in the same way that so many of his colleagues came they came as engagés, hired hands, and they would sign a contract for approximately 3 years. And at that point, after 3 years, they could elect to return to France or stay in New France as a freed person, if you will, but not free in the sense that they were slaves before, but they were now open to new contracts, if you want to look at it. This particular information that I have is from the 1667 census, and it lists les domestiques de Monseigneur l'évêque. So they were working for, Matrain was working for Monseigneur Levesque, and he was just a worker bee. That's all. It doesn't say what he was doing. So he was just generally working for the Monseigneur. And this is 1667. Matrain was ready, and he and Marie were married September 3rd, 1670. In d'Orléans, and this is the actual little marriage record that they have. So that's pretty amazing to have it from that location and have the record. It's very hard to read, as you can imagine, but it's there. Those of you who are regular viewers know how often we come back to this island. Ile d'Orléans is the island it's located. You can see it on the right left hand. You can see it's right about 3 miles from Quebec City. So the island is really one of the first parts of the province to be colonized by the French. And a large percentage of French Canadians can trace their ancestry to the early residents of this island. The island has been described truly as a microcosm of the traditional Quebec and as the birthplace of Francophones in North America. It had many names at one point, but officials later changed the name to Ile d'Orléans to honor the second son of King Francis I. He was Henri II, the Duke of Orléans. This island was known in different times as the Grande Île, Sainte Marie, and Saint Laurent for certain periods in the 17th and 18th centuries. And I give you that information always so you will know that possibly in some of the research you'll get, you might stumble across that town, that name, and be like, oh, okay, it's still Ile d'Orléans. I want to also draw your attention to the fact that Ile d'Orléans is it's not just a homogeneous island. It's got 6 different parts, and we'll go through it. Saint-Pétronille, Saint-Pierre, Sainte-Famille, Saint-François, Saint-Jean, and Saint-Laurent. So depending on where your family resided is kind of where you're going to find the records. So this is Saint-Famille was the big one. So that's, and you can see it is fairly large in terms, and it was the first one to be settled. So this is, the 2 bottom pictures are pictures of, that were given to me actually by friends of mine who had gone to the island. You can see how amazing it looks. I'm sure it's beautiful even in the winter, but in the summer, it's green, green, green. And then the other picture is, when you go to Ile d'Orléans, you're really going back in time. And this is a cheese making a fromagerie, as we call it, and this is the Church of Saint Famille as well. So this gives you an idea of the place where Matrain and Marie would have settled. Now, this particular little clip that I have is from the 1681 census. So Matrain was 50, Marie was 27, so big age difference. Matrain was 10, their firstborn, Madeleine 8, Louis, Pierre, and Charles. And they had 1 cow, no goats, and they had 3 hectares valants. So they had 3, about an acre of land. So it's kind of, I'm like, I wonder what they were doing with that, and if that was enough to get them going, because it's a smaller amount of land. So they end up having 8 children together. We have Matrain married Anne Naville, their firstborn, and they had 8 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. Some of you may know that the Miville name is one we have seen before. Her father, François Miville's second wife, was Jeanne Savonnet, who we featured in episode number 48. Marie-Madeleine married Jean Miville, there's that name again, whose father, Jacques, had married Catherine de Bayon, a Fille we featured in episode number 21. So Jacques and Anne were cousins. Marie-Madeleine then married Grégoire Boilet and had 2 more children, one of whom made it to adulthood. Louis married Angélique Boucher and had 11 children, 7 of whom made it to adulthood. He then married Marguerite Lebel and had 8 more children, 3 of whom made it to adulthood. Pierre married Marie-Thérèse Boucher, the sister of Angélique, and had 9 children, 6 of whom married, 6 of whom made it to adulthood. Charles would die in childhood. Laurent would marry Geneviève Boucher, so we have the third sister, and they would have 10 children, all of whom made it to adulthood. And then we have Marie-Anne, who died in child and infancy, and Jean Bernard, who we believe also died in infancy. So the family then moves to Rivière-Well sometime in the 1680s. The name of this river, Rivière-Well, and this town was said to be named in honor of a man named Drouel, D-H-O-U-E-L, and it's sort of, that was the pronunciation, who was a member of the Compagnie de 100 Associates and was a colleague of Samuel de Champlain. The seigneurie of Rivière-Well was granted in 1672 by the intendant Jean Talon to Jean-Baptiste François Deschamps de la Boutellerie, a nobleman from Normandy. The seigneurie was thereafter called La Boutellerie, which, by the way, actually means bottle factory. Not sure of the origins of this in France, but it would be interesting to dig this out someday. The seigneur truly worked his land and was a forward thinker. He actually lived on this land and, in fact, was buried there in 1703. So you can see where the Rivière-Well's right at the top. So they moved truly, upstream, if you will. And so this is the Concession Rivière-Well. This is the sign. It actually just celebrated its, I guess, 350th. Is that right? As I write this, or I tape this, the Battle of Rivière-Well was a very famous battle. That was a victory for the French Canadians, the simple French Canadian farmers. Basically the British were attacking New France, and word had reached the villagers that 30 ships were on their way coming down the St. Lawrence. The seigneur was away in France at the time. So what happened is the village priest took command, and a group of about 30 able-bodied men waited for their ships to arrive. Admiral Phelps from New England instructed his men to get to the shore using rowboats. The French villagers were waiting and began firing. The British retreated and did not return. And you can see on this that it would have been, at first I thought it was maybe the elder, and it could still be, he wasn't that old, but we did have Martin Dubé, who was about 19 years of age, so he would have been part of that battle. And even if you didn't actually fight in the battle, you certainly were aware of it. These are the people that actually fought, but who knows what his father and mother did as well. So just wanted to point that out. It's just important that the Dubés, as part of Rivière-Well, very important family. Martin Dubé would pass away on December 28, 1695. He was 64 years old. Martin and Marie were married 25 years at his death, and they had 8 children. And it had 8 children, 36 grandchildren, and by 1729 they had 106 descendants. We do not have a death certificate for Marie, but we know based on other records that she would pass between 1697 and 1704. So on your left is the death record for Martin. And then we have the Association des Dubés d'Amérique that put this monument up for him and for them in at Rivière-Well. So a lasting tribute is also the fact that they were on the island of Orleans, and they are listed on that monument as a founding family. And so we have Martin Dubé and where he comes from, and it lists 1667. So it tells me that Martin was located and had probably begun to, his land and all of that in 1667, because they were married in 1670. So that gives you some idea of, the longevity and that he really was there in the early period. So I wanted to point out the Association des Dubés d'Amérique, all that they've done, just an amazing website, lots of information. If this is your ancestry, you need to explore this website, possibly join the association. Certainly I was excited to find it, because I love when a family, takes that name and really honors it. Here are some further resources for you. Number 1, La Société des Filles du Roi, which is an amazing lineage website. and society, and has existed since 1994. I am a member, and I'm also the membership chairperson. And wanted to let you know that when you do join and you prove your lineage and all that good stuff, you will get a beautiful certificate. You can have access to the website. There are parts that you don't have to be a member to, but obviously when you're a member, you get access to all kinds of things. They publish a journal twice a year as well. So that is a really good point of reference for Fée du Roi research. Number two, Quebec Genealogical Society, a fairly newer society, but I have been a member a few years now. Love it. Think the resources on that are phenomenal. Then we have Généalogie de nos origines, as it's commonly called, and that is a free site. Wonderful kind of group think and what people are contributing to. Number four, Généalogie Québec, as I always say, it is like myancestry.com for French Canadian genealogy. Then we have Migration, which is really everything you ever wanted to know about les filles du roi, the Gagne soldiers. Fabulous website. It is free, but I do donate because I believe in their cause. And number six is the Facebook group, Filles du Roi Descendants. Love that Facebook group. They're very kind and generous souls. I would urge you to have a look at that as well. And with that, we say goodbye to episode number 111. I think Maggie Campion was really an amazing woman in the sense that she was a pioneer at Ile d'Orléans and then became one at Rivière-Well. And her children and her descendants, 106 descendants as of 1729. And as I've stated, the Dubé family is a very important family in that neck of the woods as well. So I think that she led an exemplary life, and we thank her for her contribution and her sacrifices, and we bless her memory. And until I see you on episode 112, au revoir.